Hey everyone, thanks for watching Bridgeport's Brightest Lights, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the different types of pixels, which type you should buy, where you should buy them from, and whether you should get 12 or 5 volt pixels. So let's get started. So first off, there are many different types of pixels. They come in different shapes and sizes, voltages. They can have different computer chips inside of them. But I'm going to be talking about the most popular ones, where you should buy them from, and what voltages you should get for them. Because that is the biggest question, what voltage should they be? So first off, pixels can come in many different sizes, like I said. I did briefly talk about this in the how to use pixels for beginners video, but that was more of the overview of them. This is going to be which types you should use. So the most popular type is the bullet pixel. It's shaped like a bullet, that's why they call it the bullet pixel. The wires come out from underneath it, has a computer chip inside of it, and this is a pretty easy one to put in the strip, and most popular uses for these are for like trees and maybe for windows. Sometimes there's some other easier ones. The second most popular type is the square pixels. So these are shaped more like a square, and they have somewhat of a flat back on them, and the wires come out the back. They have arrows showing which way the data goes on them, and these are better for more like windows usually, because they can sit flat against your house like this, or like if they're being outlined on a roof line, maybe you might want to use this if they're going to be sitting on the roof. These are the second most popular. Now there are some other types of pixels which I don't have. Next, I'd say the most popular is completely flat pixels. These have the wires coming out of the side completely, and these are great if you want to directly glue them to something, or they need to sit completely flat. These would be the best. They also have C9 bulbs or C7 bulbs. These are regular pixels and they work like regular pixels, but they're shaped like C9 and C7 lights. They're a little bit more expensive, but they are really cool. And then there is also strip pixels. I don't really recommend these because they break easily and they're not waterproof. Most pixels come waterproof. These are waterproof and these are waterproof. So you can dunk these in water and most of the time they'll be perfectly fine. I wouldn't recommend that, but if you can do that, usually you can leave them out in the snow or the rain and they'll be perfectly fine. Whereas strip, they're not usually waterproof, and if they get wet, they're damaged and you have to waterproof them. And if they break, they're not as easy to fix as these pixels. So I'd recommend either getting bullet pixels or square pixels. Maybe flat pixels if you need them, and if you want some other cool designs, you can use the C7 or C9. Usually the bullet pixels are the cheapest, so that's usually what I go with, because I don't really need the square pixels. I find that bullet pixels work perfectly fine against my windows. Next is what type of data should they use. So pixels can come with a bunch of different types of data chips basically inside of them, and they have some weird names, but there are WS2811 pixels. These are the most popular and just about everyone uses these. I don't know of anyone who uses other ones, but there's WS2811, there's WS2812, there's WS2812B, and then there's a ton of other names. These can all usually be used on the most popular controllers, but I rarely see them being sold on any websites. The most common one, like I said, are WS2811, and these are sold on just about every single website. So I recommend just picking one and sticking to it, and I'd recommend using WS2811 because it's the most popular, it's sold everywhere, and honestly they're usually the cheapest. Next is the color order. So usually you hear people say RGB pixels or RGB lights. The RGB stands for the color order in them. So if you didn't see my last video, basically each light has a red LED, a green LED, and a blue LED inside of it. And then you could turn on certain ones to make it different colors and stuff. Now, it's in the order of RGB, or red, green, blue. That is the order that these receive the data. You can also buy pixels that are, for example, BRG, or BGR, or RBG. There's so many different types. So RGB is red, green, blue. BGR would be blue, green, red. RBG would be red, blue, green. You can buy them in any order with 9 combinations. And then there are some pixels that are RGBWs, and basically they also have a white LED inside of it. So when you have white on for the pixels, they take the most amount of power because you need all 3 LEDs on to make white. If you have a white LED inside of here, you only need the white LED on, so it doesn't take as much power. But they're not that common. All of these orders can be programmed on the Falcon controller and some other popular controllers like the Cult boards. So you can buy any type, but I'd recommend getting the RGB because they're the most popular too. Most people use them and they're sold on every single website I bought pixels from. So I talked about the different computer chips, the different sizes, the different colors for what you should use with these. But now I'm going to talk about voltage. What voltage should you have these pixels? The most common types are 5 volts and 12 volts. There's a lot of people that use 5 volts and a lot of people that use 12 volts. There are also 24 volt pixels, but those are very uncommon. Most boards cannot run them. I know the Falcon can, but you have to solder out a transistor because the Falcon boards only go up to 13 volts. And then you have to get different power supplies, so it's a lot complicated with 24 volt pixels. So I'd recommend either getting 12 or 5 volts. Now, which one of those should you get? 5 volts or 12 volts? The main difference is if you have a lot of pixels that you don't want to power inject, you don't want to power inject at all, I'd recommend 12 volts. If you don't mind power injection and it's easy for what you have, you can use 5 volts. So basically with 5 volt pixels, if you're running them at 100%, you can have about 50-ish pixels and then they start to turn red and then you need to power inject them. I will have a video coming up soon about power injection and how that works. But basically what it is you have to inject power in the middle of the string because the lights take so much power that the rest at the end of the string don't have power. So that's what power injection is. With 12 volt pixels, you can go up to 100 and maybe even more pixels at 100% brightness without power injection. But most people don't use 100% brightness. I use 30% brightness. The year before that, I used 40%, but I decreased it since I added more lights. So when you're using 30%, you could potentially get up to 200 pixels with 12 volts and maybe 100 pixels with 5 volts. So let's say you have a big roof line and there's a 30-foot cable to get there. Let's say your controller is far away from there, so it's really hard to get any power or data up to there. I'd recommend using 12 volts for that because that way it's less power injection. This does not mean that you don't have to power inject though. There are cases when you still have to power inject for 12 volt pixels. In fact, basically every prop in my display has to have power injection. The tree has to have power injection and it's using 12 volts. The roof has power injection and it's using 12 volts. The arches and fence are using 12 volts and they have power injection. So this does not mean you don't need power injection, it just means you need less. So 12 volts I would say is probably the most popular, but there are still a lot of people that use 5 volts. And most of the time 5 volt pixels are cheaper, so I would recommend going with 5 volts if you have a lot of big props and stuff. But if you don't and you have everything spread out and power injection is harder, I highly recommend 12 volts. Now you don't have to pick just one. You can have 12 volts and 5 volt pixels in your display. I don't recommend it because it can be a little bit confusing. I use all 12 volt pixels, but you can have, let's say, like your house face, your roof, and then your garage. You can have that at 12 volts. And then you have some more dense props that power injection is easier for. You can have those on 5 volt pixels, but you cannot combine 5 volts and 12 volts. You can't have 12 volt strands then solder in a 5 volt strand. If you put 5 volts on a 12 volt strand of pixels, the pixels won't even light up, but they will still work. If you put 12 volts on a 5 volt strand, most of the time that will be burned out and you can't use the strand again. So I'd recommend if you are going to use both types of pixels that you mark them well, because if you think they're 12 volts and then you apply 5 volts or the other way around, you could break your pixels. So that's why I recommend picking one, but you can pick two if you want. But my personal preference is go with 12 volts. Even though it's a little bit more expensive, it saves on power injection and it's a lot easier. So I'd recommend 12 volt pixels. Just to recap, I'd get RGB pixels, that's what I use. And this is all my personal preferences. You can do whatever you want, but I get RGB pixels with WS2811 chips and they're all 12 volts. Now sometimes I have some bullet pixels and then I have square pixels. Most of the time they're bullet. So that's usually the pixels that I get. Now, one other thing I did forget to mention when you're ordering pixels is you have to figure out a pigtail type. Pigtails are basically how you connect the strands to the wire and then to the controller. They have different connectors that you can buy. There is 3 main types, but you could count a 4th one, and I will talk about them. Now, I would recommend only going with one of these. You need to pick a connector and stick to the connector, because if you buy other ones, it's a big hassle with wire and stuff. You can buy exchangers, which you can plug in a pigtail, then it has a different type. But here are the main types, and I hope I'm saying them all right, but the main 2 are Reiru and X-Connect. Those are the 2 main connector types. And then the next popular one is Paul Zhang. I think that's how you say it. Don't yell at me if I didn't say it right. And then there is one other connector that no one really uses, but it is there. I call it the Amazon connector. It basically is a connector that does not seal, but it does connect the wires. And these usually come on lights that you buy from Amazon. So there are some other places that have these connectors, but it's not that common. I have to say the most common connector is X-Connect. Now, I'd recommend when you buy pixels, go Reiru or X-Connect. They're probably about tied for most popular. And all of the stores that I will show you to buy your pixels from, they do have at least one of these types. Now, Paul Zhang is not as common. Some stores have them, but not many. And like I said, the Amazon connector is not popular that much at all. Now, the reason why there are different connectors is it's kind of like with Android and iPhone, if you want to think about it that way. iPhone has their own charger, and then Android has their own charger. The reason why they have their own charger is because if you buy an iPhone phone, you need to buy an iPhone charger. So that way iPhone makes money because you bought their phone, so you have to buy their charger. You can't go to Android and buy their charger because Android has chargers for only Android phones. The reason there's these different connectors is one store that's run by a guy named Reiru. He had the Reiru pigtails and he made those. That way, once you bought from him, you had to continue buying pixels from him. If you didn't, then switching out pigtails would be a lot harder, and then that's how the other types were made. Now, that's not that common anymore because since there are tons of pixel stores, they supply all of them. So the reason why we still have 3 connectors is because of what happened at the beginning, and now no one's gonna ever pick one connector. So I'd recommend picking either Reiru or X-Connect connectors, like I said. So that's usually the pixels that I get. Now, where should you buy them? There are tons of different stores online where you can buy them from. So I'm going to show the most popular ones and compare them by prices and how easy it is to get shipping there and where they're located. So right now I'm at my computer and I have all the different stores I've bought pixels from. So I'm going to put these in the list because I've bought pixels from here, so I know how the customer service is. And I have one other store that I haven't bought from, but I do recommend. These are not all of the different stores because there are many other stores out there you can buy from that I do recommend you check out. But these are just my favorites because I've ordered it from them before. So first, I'd probably say one of the most popular is Wired Watts. They sell a bunch of different things. They have power supplies, they have wire, they have enclosures, they have tools, they even have apparel. But the main thing is they have smart pixels. So you can buy pixels from here. They also have icicles, they have bullets, they have 5 volts and 12 volts. They also have square nodes in 5 volts and 12 volts. They have strip if you do want to buy those. And then they also have floodlights too. Now, one thing I'm not a huge fan about is their pixels only come in 50 count. No matter how you buy them, they only come in 50 count. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I like buying mine in 100 count. But it's however you like to buy them. I bought pixels from here before. The first light show I did with pixels, I bought the pixels from here. They worked great. I did have one dead pixel when they came, but I contacted Ken, the owner, and he was super nice. And he had me ship back the strand, and he sent me out a new one, and that one worked perfectly fine. So they have 5 volts and 12 volts. I'd recommend. They also have X-Connect and Reiru, like I talked about, but they don't have the Paul Zhang connectors. But the pixels they sell here are all RGB and WS2811. So this is a really good place to buy pixels from. My only thing I don't like about them is how they don't sell them at 100 count. But other than that, it's a really amazing store and I highly recommend you go there because their customer service is amazing. Now, the next place I'd recommend going to is Gilbert Engineering. So Gilbert Engineering used to kind of be more like Boscoyo Studios almost. They sell Coro and stuff and strip. but now they've started adding a lot more pixels and accessories and stuff. I did buy pixels from here last year because they had a really good sale going on. Gilbert Engineering does have 5 volts and 12 volts, and then you can buy the C9 lights. I have bought from here too. I bought their 12 volts, and they have a bunch of different ways you can buy them in. You can buy them as piece stakes, which are some really cool lights that I'd recommend you check out. I'll play a video of them right now. So there's some really cool lights, and I'm thinking about adding them to my light show this year. And then they also have 25 count, 50 count, 100 count, 100 count with 6-inch spacing. And then they do have some other stuff, so I really recommend going here. And they do have Reiru, X-Connect, and Paul Jane connectors. I usually buy Reiru, like I said. Their price right now is $29.75 for 100. I did buy these once, and they were down to $25. So that's why I bought them here. I did also get a bad pixel with this store. Now, the customer service is really nice, but responding wasn't as easy as Wired Watts. When I sent Wired Watts an email, and they instantly responded within a few hours and helped me out. With Gilbert Engineering, it was a little bit harder. I emailed them, and I did not get a response. I messaged them on Facebook. I also did not get a response there. But then I called them because they have a number, and they didn't answer the first time, but they did answer the second time. They were really nice there. They did help me get a new strand, but trying to connect with them was a little bit harder. But their customer service, like I said, is really nice. But this was a year ago, so they might have changed it, and they might be able to pick up easier or connect with you easier. But with my experience, it was a little hard to get to them. But these pixels are cheaper than Wired Watts, because if you go to Wired Watts, they only come in 50 count for $17. If you were to get 250 count to make 100 count, that'd be $34. Whereas here at Gilbert Engineering, it's only $29.75 or about $30. And then they also have options where you can buy 10,000 bulk if for some reason you need to, or 3,000 minimum, so you can get a little bit of a discount. The third place I'd recommend is Holiday Lighting Express. Now, this website is more for AC Christmas lights, but they do have RGB pixels from here, and I have bought here before when I realized I didn't have enough pixels. They had a really nice sale going on, and I was going to have to pay a lot more if I went to Gilbert Engineering or Wired Watts. So thankfully, they had some stuff. When I ordered, they only had 12-volt pixels, but now they have a lot of stuff. They have C9 bulbs. They do have some pixels. They are $26.50. This is with black wire, 100 count, 12 volt, WS2811. So it is cheaper than Gilbert Engineering if you were to get the 100 count. And then they do have these cool glow balls. They have floodlights. So they have a lot of stuff here. I didn't get any bad pixels, so I don't know how their customer service is. It didn't take too long to order from them, so it was really nice going through here. Now, one thing I did forget to say is all 3 of these stores are in the United States, so shipping doesn't take too long. Most of them are down in the south part of the United States. Now, the 4th store I'd recommend, I have not ordered from here before, but I have heard it's a good store. It's called Aliexpress and Reiru store. He sells a bunch of different types of pixels and other stuff, but everything from here is from China, and the shipping is very expensive. So I don't recommend going here unless you absolutely need to. Usually their pixels are cheaper, but their shipping is very expensive. I might be buying from here this year to get some piece stakes, but other than that, I wouldn't recommend buying pixels from here because they are really expensive. They're from China, so it does take a while. So I just recommend going through one of these stores. Now, one other store I did forget to mention is RGB Man. I have not actually placed an order here before, but I have had someone who donated lights to me. They bought them from here and had them shipped to my house. So this store is really for buying bulk amount of pixels. You can buy small amount of pixels, but it is a little bit more expensive. So they have a store, so you can select pixels or bulk pixels, and you can also email them for custom orders. For bulk pixels, if you get 3,000 or more, they are decently cheap here. You can look at this depending on how many you buy, and then you can buy 10,000 or more, and they're even cheaper. So for 100 count, which does take 8 to 12 weeks for delivery, of 5 volt, it is $22.95, whereas it was almost $30 on the other websites. Now, if you didn't want to buy bulk and you just need a few pixels and you wanted to go to pixels in stock, they do also have some nice orders here too. $28.95. That is cheaper than Gilbert Engineering and Wired Watts, but it's just slightly more expensive than Holiday Lighting Express. They do have 12 volt pixels and sometimes they have 5 volt pixels, but I've only been able to see 5 volt pixels if you buy them in bulk. So if you don't get them in bulk, you can only get 12 volt here. But these are the different stores, so I'd recommend buying from any of these stores. Now, if you were to ask me what my favorite was, I'd probably have to say either Gilbert Engineering or Wired Watts. The reason is because I've had the best customer service with Wired Watts. That's the reason why I picked Wired Watts. And Wired Watts sells a lot of other stuff, so you can almost buy everything you need for your light show here. They have power supplies. They do have some controllers, but these aren't all Falcon controllers. They have receivers and stuff, but they don't have full Falcon controllers. But they have power supplies, so you can buy almost everything here. The one thing you can't buy though is Pixel Strip or Pixel Core or anything. That's why Gilbert Engineering would be my other favorite, because they do have pixels and accessories. They do have strip. They do have floodlights. You could buy basically anything you need from this store except for power supplies and controller. So Wired Watts or Gilbert Engineering would be my two favorites to go through, but I do recommend buying from the other stores too, or at least checking them out. And those weren't even all the stores. I looked up different places to buy lights, and these are just a few of the stores that I found. Some of them I have ordered from, and most of them have pixels. So I do recommend you check out any of these places on here and figure out what is best for you. But like I said, I do have my two favorites if you were to ask me, which are Wired Watts or Gilbert Engineering. So that was the list of everything I'd recommend when you're going to look through what type of pixels you should buy and from what places you should buy. Now, if you are wondering, last year, once a month, I put out a little teaser of my X-Lights view for the light show, and I haven't done one for January yet, and the reason why is I haven't completely set up the layout yet for what it's going to be, and I'm honestly taking a little bit of a break until about March-ish, so I am adding more lights, and I am not going to have a teaser every month though, because I'm not going to have nearly as many songs as I did last year. So there will be one teaser once I make it, and then after that you probably won't see anything until Halloween gets closer, and then I'll show an actual trailer of the Halloween light show. Now, if you have any questions, you can leave them below. I'm not promising that I'll be able to answer all of them because I am busy and stuff, and it's been hard answering comments, but you can leave them below if you do have any. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and I'll see you next time.